GoodBuy, the show where we tell you about a thing and whether or not you should actually buy that thing. Today, we're reviewing Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, as written by the wonderful Andrew King and adapted to video by myself.
Before we go, apologies for the precautions.
In the lead up to its release, Cyberpunk 2077 occupied a unique space in my mind. It wasn't just that it was heavily hyped, as I'd been majorly excited for video games before, even twice that year as I eagerly awaited Half-Life Alyx and The Last of Us Part 2. But Cyberpunk 2077 took on the added burden of being a heavily hyped video game releasing after a year of pandemic-induced isolation. It wasn't healthy, but as that terrible year wound its torturous route to an end, Cyberpunk took on an inflated importance in my mind. Sure, not being able to see anyone in person was bad, but at least at the end of the year I'd get to play Cyberpunk. It was a promise of next-gen escapism at a time all of us wanted to escape from. And CD Projekt Red's marketing took every opportunity to fuel that hype.
Gonna be a game to remember.
The game's first and only expansion, Phantom Liberty, can't make Cyberpunk 2077 into the game that any of us imagined. Nothing could. But it does make the game the best it's ever been, improving on much of what held it back at its widely maligned launch. I can confidently say that Cyberpunk 2077 is now good. Just not, pin all your hopes and dreams on it good. For most of the improvements Phantom Liberty brings, you don't even need to buy the DLC. The 2.0 update, which arrives at the same time as the expansion, is free for anyone who owns the game, and it pretty thoroughly takes the game apart to put it back together again. Though CD Projekt Red hasn't addressed my biggest issue, the buildings of Night City remain, by and large, window dressing instead of vectors for exploration, it does add enough to the game that you won't have nearly as much time to fixate on its remaining shortcomings. It can take some time to see the vision though. Update 2.0 radically reworks the game's skill system, which caused some growing pains when I first booted up the game. If you start past a certain level like I did, you'll need to completely respec your character. I didn't realize this at first and instead was wondering why my character was extremely over-encumbered. It took a few minutes, but I figured it out and the changes to the skill tree are one of the best things on offer here. Speccing into the body skill tree opened up some cool new perks, like the ability to regain HP by running around, which helped me finally knock out the boxing tourney from the main game. When paired with my new ability to dash a bunch of times in a row, this encouraged a hyperactive kinetic playthrough that perfectly matched my preference for the game's katanas. The DLC adds a new relic branch to the skill tree too, opening up several new abilities to further customize V. All of this goes a long way towards making Cyberpunk 2077 a more dynamic and exciting game, even if you're just playing content that was there since launch. The missions that weren't there since launch don't make the best first impression though.
V? Can you hear me?
The roughly 20-hour-long expansion begins with V getting an invite to Dogtown, a new area of the map that was locked off until now. Answering the call will get V caught up in essentially Call of Duty, as the DLC kicks off with a lengthy series of linear action missions that find V sneaking into the district, sprinting after a crashing plane, fighting a giant robot, and rendezvousing with Rosalind Myers, the President of the new United States of America, and Songbird, a hacker who reaches out to V through her construct.
Guilt is charged.
This action-packed opening sounds exciting in theory, but it keeps you from seeing what the game will actually be for about 2 hours. And in practice, it's a lot of boring first-person platforming and mediocre shootouts. The expansion ends on a similarly weak note with a frustrating cat and mouse sequence that goes on way too long and leaves little room for roleplaying. In between though, there's plenty of good stuff.
I'll have a double cheeseburger while you're at it.
Once the game opens up, you quickly find that Dogtown has a lot to offer. It still has the same problem as the base game, that many of the doors don't open and skyscrapers that loom over the exterior space are often closed off entirely on the interior, but Dogtown's smaller surface area means that the space is significantly better utilized than in the main game. You get to know the map well by the end of the expansion, and it's smartly designed with memorable buildings that you can use as landmarks as you drive around, such as a black and neon green pyramid. Phantom Liberty offers you more reasons to care about how well you can navigate the space. Once you reach Dogtown, you have the option to start doing missions in which you escort cars back to a garage and receive a better payout depending on the speed of your delivery and the amount of damage the car takes along the way. There are a bunch of these, and it's a smart way to highlight the new vehicle combat that has been added with the 2.0 update. In the original game, you could drive your car or you could fight, but they were completely separate mechanical experiences outside of set missions. Adding vehicle combat means that there's always the possibility that violence might break out, adding weight to the exploration, even if it's just by car. Toss in the significantly more robust police system, and you have much more tomfoolery to get up to in the open world that isn't directly tied to a quest or gig. The story content is generally enjoyable too, especially the new ending Phantom Liberty adds to the main game, which I won't spoil, except to say that I found it surprisingly moving. I was happy to see Keanu Reeves' Johnny Silverhand and enjoyed the opportunity to hear his cynical takes on each new mission.
So go out and play. Just don't get played.
Though Johnny returns, Solomon Reed, a local fixer played by Idris Elba, is the biggest addition to the cast. Most of the main missions have you working with Reed in the same way you worked with Takamura in the base game, and waiting in between as he sets up the next job. A conceit I've always liked, as it gives you a future goal and sense of urgency in the main story, while organically building in time to explore the side content. On both fronts, Phantom Liberty's missions are pretty solid. I especially enjoyed two quests, one involving a pair of high-rolling French twins, and one in which V gets to assume the identity of a heavy from out of town. There's some tedium in spots, like missions where you need to escort Reed with a sniper rifle from a distance, and that cat and mouse level near the end of the game that I mentioned before, but there's also plenty to like. There are a lot of new side gigs assigned to you by the recurring Mr. Hands character, and many of these are worth seeking out, like one where a guy gives you drugs before telling you a story, allowing you to vividly experience his tale playing as one of the characters in the retelling. Mostly, the missions keep you moving along at a nice pace and show off what the game does well. That's crucial because with the 2.0 update, the game does a lot well. It still isn't an all-time great RPG, but there are fewer hiccups keeping you from enjoying the many things it succeeds at. Phantom Liberty is good, but the 2.0 update is the rising tide that lifts all boats. It makes Cyberpunk 2077 unambiguously worth the trip.